It can't stop the day we dissect the news. Flipping on the edge, choices to choose. Politics and laughter, a blend that's so real. Tuning for the stories that make you feel. With guests from every angle, let's bridge the divide. Finding the truth in the humor we can't hide.
Well, the problem with it, basically talking about the great gurus, the great teachers who are asking you to look beyond, to look inward. And I think you hit the nail on the head, by the way. Yes, music can be another distraction. Yes, you're supposed to let things go and look inward. Yes and no. And let me explain why. The reason why music or sounds are used in terms of as they relate to meditation is to help you look inward. The repetitive nature, for example, in Islam, it's the open prayer, and not just in Islam, in Judaism, in the hymns being sung in churches.
Well, Arabic to me is artistic. If you see the Arabic language,
exactly,
it's like art itself. The actual language itself looks like art. It's gorgeous.
But that's the interesting thing about it, where music or sounds being produced can help you. That repetitive nature can help you, or like low hums. Again, you in Buddhism, that is a big
Buddhism
thing.
Aum. That's the Aum. Yeah.
And the gongs, and it is meant to be this way to
Centering.
center,
Like centers you.
and actually look inward. So who's to say that you cannot listen to some artist that actually invokes that within you? That's why music is such a big deal. Now, obviously, you and I could probably talk for hours on the commercialization of music, and we can talk about. But that's why I love independent musicians. And by the way, can I just point out, I started listening to Pandora. The internet radio.
Oh, Pandora.
No, Pandora radio station.
Which has been kind of falling away. It's lost a lot of share off of Spotify.
Correct.
I used to have Pandora, and I actually dropped my subscription.
Yeah. And what I love about it, do you know what I love about it the most? That it throws me a curveball. Boy, I have learned so many wonderful...
Its algorithm is purposely throwing you like random stuff.
Yes. And I can basically just say like, hey, throw what you got, what you got at me. Yeah. And I've learned about so many wonderful musicians that I would have never heard before if it wasn't for Pandora and the randomness, rather than I'm going to purposely look for this genre and I want these musicians only, or these artists only, or any artist that is like this. And of course, I'm a big fan. I mean, having grown up, being so interested in science fiction and where humanity is going and all of that, Jean-Michel Jarre, Oxygen No. 2.
Okay.
That super space... It actually came out in the mid-70s. Okay. That super space agey, on the forefront of these like space interest and revolution. We're talking about like the heydays of Star Trek. Yeah. Not a reference to our podcast, but just it's interesting.
There is no copyright there. No copyright.
No. But it's interesting that even a piece like that, you can close your eyes and you can imagine yourself traveling amongst the stars.
Yep.
And even though you're right, it may not allow you to go through this moment of introspection. It allows you to use your own imagination to go beyond this. So that's the wonderful thing about art.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was recently kind of like finishing up the book Nexus by the guy, got to get his name right. It's Yuval Noah Harari. Have you heard of this guy? He's a writer, author. Dude's quite a writer. He also wrote a book called Sapiens. Really good book about the traveling. Anyway, he has this in Nexus. He's talking about our age of information. And I think he makes a pretty good argument that there's good information and there's bad information. And as AI begins to take over, what what our real crux is as humans is to absorb and take in the best kinds of information we can possibly take. And that's what art is. To me, art is the kind of information that makes you think ethically. It makes you see big pictures. It makes you make connections, develop rules and hierarchies and schema so that you can understand. It makes you think about time and space. It makes you think about what ifs. It makes you think about the juxtapositions of what is right and wrong, ethics, right? One of the greatest things that I ever teach kids is this framework for thinking. It's called depth of knowledge icons. This was developed as a way, especially for GT learners, to kind of think about the world.
Define GT.
Gifted and talented.
Okay.
For TAG, or talented gifted kids. And these are typically kids who score way off the charts with like reading is boring because they're just so quick. So they need to be challenged. They need to be extended in new ways and creative stuff. They build robots and stuff in class and write their own novels. And GT kids are pretty unique. They're pretty awesome. They challenge you. Boy, they challenge you as a teacher. They're the ones that challenge you hard because they're, if not as intelligent as you, more intelligent. They beat me in chess. Like I'll play a few moves and like,
if there's one
damn,
game,
I just lost to a 12-year-old, you know, and they're crushed you. They're like, oh yeah, I just did the King's Indian move, and you're like, oh, darn. Anyway, Harari, this guy, he has this. He sold a lot of books. He's been making the circuit too, but he talks about like how we need to be so careful about the information we take. He uses this great metaphor of talking about like food. And so if you just eat like more food, I'm paraphrasing him now, but if you just eat more food, it's not so good for you, right? It just more food and more. That's what the internet is. This is the way he's arguing about AI and the internet and stuff. If you just consume, you get heart disease, you die of diabetes, your liver gives out, your stomach is acid reflux, you just, you're a glutton. So you think about eating fruits and vegetables and eating good, nuts and legumes and all the good stuff that makes your body run, right? So art, a way to think of art is it's your fruits and vegetables. It's for your mind. Art is for your soul, for your mind. Art is the best art, I'd argue, it doesn't make you feel terrible all the time, but it makes you introspective. It makes you think and center, like you were talking about. It makes you present in the moment. It makes you think about what could be. It makes you realize that with the chaos in the political world, that'll come and go. There's this guy, this George Grosz. I was showing you that piece of art that he did in World War II.
Unbelievable.
Astounding, right? This thing, the Pillars of Society. We got to throw that up so people can kind of see this thing. But this guy could see what was coming in World War II with the Nazis, and just the way he depicts leaders and people in society, of German society, what was going on.
At the time, yeah,
astounding.
It is
right?
genuinely
an incredible piece of art.
By the way, can I just touch upon something very important here? Because what you've just said, I think, is of such incredible importance. And I'm not sure if you meant to say it, but I think what you've just outlined during our conversation here today, and I think this is a wonderful loop around to conclude this conversation with.
Yeah.
Would you agree that not only would art allow us to have a better perspective on things, not only will it allow us to transcend our own experiences, but to learn from others? Not only does it play an important role in shaping who we are, but shaping who we will be. And finally, would you agree that art is an incredible outlet, whether it's music, whether it's painted form, whether it's written form, whether it's sculpting, that art is an incredible
novels, anything.
Incredible way for us to express our feelings, whether positive or negative, our interests. And it's an incredible outlet that as we move towards, I was thinking about this. As we move towards, and going back to art, I think in one of our first episodes, we actually talked about this. And again, we're coming such full circle. And I got so excited after listening everything what you had mentioned.
Yeah,
we are moving towards a time in our human existence where instead of having AI create our art for us, to invest our time into becoming proficient in learning how to play an instrument, use a brush, thinking about Bob Ross. To this very day, Bob Ross has created transcendent experiences for others where it is mesmerizing.
And it's just his landscapes, right?
His landscapes.
But the way he does it with his
the way he
pretty
does.
trees and his soft
Yes.
brooks and his... I love his narrating too, because just so...
Just listening to him.
Healing, you know?
Yes. And would you say that this is this fork in the road where we can just allow AI to do a lot of the stuff, the daily stuff for us, so we can focus on our humanity.
Yeah.
We can focus on the arts.
That's the hope, is that AI will become the great offloader, that we can become the delegator, that we can offload pay the bills, earn the return on the investments,
and make the work.
Make the work.
Menial
Drive me to work. Whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know, but of course, driving is an art too. If great driving is truly a piece of art.
Have you seen that movie called The Art of Driving the Rain? It has that protagonist from This Is Us, the dad, the protagonist who's with Mandy Moore. He's the father of the family.
Okay.
He's in it.
I can see the face.
So can I. I can't remember.
We'll have to.
Yeah, we'll have to look that up. I was gonna say people in the comment sections will let us know. Yeah. But that show is quite an interesting show in so many ways. But there's this movie called The Art of Driving in the Rain. And by the way, if you've never seen the documentary Senna, or the documentary Schumacher, totally watch. Again,
Schumacher.
Big Formula One fan here. So watch those
Ford versus Ferrari. Ford versus Ferrari.
Yeah, Ken Miles, another. It's an art form. It's basically you are moving this, and that's the other thing about. Oh my goodness, we'll have to do an episode about cars, but because oh my goodness, get ready for that one.
I'll have to brush up.
But it's interesting because you can also say that the early cars, they were art pieces. Sure. They were meant to be art pieces.
Right. Yeah.
People were using basic tools to craft panels, and they were doing it by hand and by eye. That's why some of the greatest cars came from the places where the Renaissance created the best sculptors. Italy. Yeah. For heaven's sakes, right? Italy. That's why, for example, if I were to ever go to Italy, I would need to visit the three holiest sites, as I mentioned. I would have to visit, Maranello, St. Agata Bolognese, and I would have to go visit, Rome and Florence, down the road. Yeah. But that's the interesting
for your car
thing.
stuff.
I mean,
I got you.
Yeah,
I got you.
But that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Because there is an expression in that, in the same way that there is an expression in taking joy. Or having joy out of crafting something that you do from that physical expression. Dance is an art form that can be transcendent. Yeah. In fact, in some religious practices, dancing is the art. Yep. For example, you look at some of the native tribes where dancing is the art form.
You dance till you pass out. You dance. Yeah, there's remember I talked with Joseph Campbell about this. But there's a tribe in Africa where you dance to the point where you collapse because you're supposed to have a religious experience.
Well, the same thing with what is it? The dancing dervishes in Southeast
Native
Asia,
Americans when they do their dances stuff. Yeah, it's you're part of a spiritual tradition that's you're connecting to something.
Chants. I mean,
you.
talking about
Yeah.
introspection, chanting
Yep.
is a way. It's creation of music.
Yeah.
Whether it's the Native American chants, whether it is the Gregorian, priests and monks chanting, and which, by the way, became super popular. It was just because I've been listening to this a lot. Enigma. In the 90s, the merging of the technological era of techno music with Gregorian chants in the background. Remarkable stuff.
Yeah. I forget her name, but she was was it Heloise? She was the greatest writer of Gregorian chanting, but because she was a woman, she never got like credit. What was her name? Oh, I'm going to forget it. She was...
Hold on a second. What century is this? Because are you talking about Hilda von...
Hilda.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I know.
Hilda
von... Hold on. I
got to look it up.
Yeah, same here.
She was like... that was it. Hildegard
von Bingen.
Von Bingen.
That's it.
She's like...
she's
like the greatest... like author of all chant music.
Have you?
But because she was existing in a world of men, dominant men that wouldn't give her credit, she's the writer of all of so much of what was going on with that music, and yet she wasn't allowed to partake in it.
Yeah, Hilda von Bingen. It's so funny. My music appreciation class got
the
me
irony of the Catholic Church, right? Yeah. It's a walking irony, the beauty and the awfulness, right? What a it's and our boy Michelangelo, right? I mean, there you go. Think about painting. We've actually seen it. We've been you've been to the Sistine Chapel, and you walk in and you can see it, and it's just so stunning. And of course, what are so many Americans obsessed about? That man has a penis. They're not even worried about God almost touching the finger, right? What they're obsessed about is that he's
the divine spark.
He doesn't have like pants on, and you're like,
which, by the way, have you seen the Netflix show called Conk on Earth?
Mm-mm. It's that's similar. Yeah, no, Idiocracy. Where you lose the forest from the trees,
For anybody who needs a good laugh, I recommend watching that show because it puts things in perspective in so many different ways. Which, by the way, can I also point out, David, the statue of David.
Well, his hands are. We've seen him. We've been in the Florence.
And the intricacy of the veins in the arms,
the beauty, and then the size. It was what you're like. What you just blown away that a human being constructed this out of that marble, that white marble. How he could see it, and he's the artist that said it's already there. I just had to reveal what was already God, what God created. And you're like, what the? Those are moments when you're kind of like, I'm not religious, but you do wonder, like, the greatest artists are clearly
inspired.
They're tapped into something. The shamans, whatever you want. The greatest art, there's something, and it's why many times they're so tortured, right? I mean, you can imagine. I mean, can you imagine Mozart? Mozart, maybe the greatest musical genius that ever lived. Maybe there's some arguments that you could make that he was maybe the greatest. He's living in a time when, you're having to give lessons to monarchs and stuff like Frederick. Actually, I think it did enjoy his music, but it was just
he was a court composer. I mean, that's why
you're having to deal with people who are just buffoons.
True, but don't forget though, there is still a certain sense of appreciation. And here's the wonderful thing: for example, the Zauberflöte, the magic flute. The amazing thing about it is, and and I think this is the music has always been very hierarchical in terms of who had access to it and who didn't.
Well, in Western traditions.
In Western tradition,
Yeah.
right. Whereas in other traditions, in other societies, in other cultures, it was mostly meant to be consumed on every societal level. Where in Western traditions, there was a hierarchy.
Sure.
You don't get to go to the opera.
No.
Whereas with Mozart, and now you could argue again, because of economics, he decided that it's time for and by the way, he pushed boundaries. That's the one thing. And by the way, can I just also point out how cool it is? You've got a lot of these, we were talking about Bach before. For example, Bach loved Paganini. Because he thought that, like, all right, what this person is doing with the violin is completely ridiculous, and I'm going to go over there and like watch, and so I can learn.
Yeah.
And of course you've got, Vivaldi, the Red Priest, and the Four Seasons of, amongst many of the, famous works of art. But what's interesting about Mozart is he created the very first, at least in, Western European society, the very first operas for the people, where the general public could be entertained, where the general public had access to it.
Sure.
So he already was kind of like trying to spread that the art amongst the public.
Sure.
And it was not just I'm a court composer. For example, the Brandenburg concertos were literally created so that Bach could get a job. It was, do you know what I call that?
Yeah.
It was the greatest job application failure of anyone.
Yeah. I was going to say that. Who's going to be on that interview committee?
And he didn't get the job. That's the craziness of it, right?
One of the greatest, or three of them, right? Because there's 1, 2, and 3.
Yes.
3 of the greatest pieces that have ever been written.
Yes.
Ever. That it's like, the company is going to pass on.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. We have enough.
What
of
does
these.
it say about our society?
And that's the thing. That's the beautiful thing about Mozart, because I think he was kind of pushing the boundaries at the time. He was, and maybe, just maybe, like you said, sometimes you look at some pieces of art and you're like, why? Why would you do this?
Yeah.
But sometimes they're created to push the boundaries. Sometimes they're created to be prolific. Sometimes they're created to be a reflection. And it's interesting because with Mozart, he also was using a subject matter that was unheard of before, because it was considered to be indecent, where he was depicting, in this particular case, he was depicting, I forget which opera piece it was, but he was depicting everyday things.
Oh, it's always
like Marriage of Figaro.
Well, for him, it's sex, and
it was exactly.
He's always into the carnal and stuff, because that's how he's driven.
Well, and to
kind
be
of be
fair,
a bit of a rebel against the dad and stuff.
Exactly.
And,
but then
I was just looking up. He actually wrote over 600 pieces of music. I knew it was a lot, but so he makes it to what, 34, 35? He only makes it to 34.
Yeah, and he finally ends up
Can you
dying.
imagine?
And,
I know. Oh
and he, by the way, he's.
But that's why I say, because Bach lived a long life, right?
Yeah, and Bach had how many children? And by the way, he didn't have grandson.
any. Bach didn't have any stops on his organ. That's why he had so many kids.
Oh,
thank you.
Okay,
folks.
that's
I'll be
good.
here all week.
That's good.
But
joke of the week.
It's a musician's joke. But Mozart. That's why some people. I used to listen to the Karl Haas hour that was on 80. He was the one that introduced me to the idea that maybe because of just his short life and what he did
during that
in this short life, as so many great artists live so short, they only make it so long. God, but 600 works in 1,000 years, we'll still be listening to Mozart. If humanity's still in existence in 1,000,000 years, we'll still have Mozart. Well, there'll be people that are trying to copy and when you see his manuscripts, he used the 2-pen method. So he was writing the bass line as he was writing the top, and there's no erasure marks. That's why they say he's so incredible, because he's composing the piece, and he's going and like if you look at who's our other big three? It's Bach, it's Mozart, and it's Beethoven, right?
Yeah.
Beethoven's pieces are these tortured, like you see
but
his
Beethoven
manuscripts.
was in an argument with himself. If he had just decided that, hey, listen, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to write the Appassionata.
Yeah.
And I'm going to write the Appassionata.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to write it down. And
No.
I think it's already done.
No, it's
and
torn
it's already
pages
perfect.
and ripped off, and it's
because
spin
he was-
on, and he's throwing it in the fire, and he's it's erased all over the place, and you could see this.
Do you know why?
Tortured and
Yeah,
just,
but you know why? Because it was a socialist.
well, he got a dream about country music, what was to come, and going, no, I'm kidding,
No,
I'm
no,
kidding,
no.
I'm kidding.
No,
but,
no.
no, and I play country music.
Yeah, I know.
That's why Mozart. It's just he was tapped into something. I don't know.
You could say
I don't know.
he was tapped into something divine because at the
he
time
would
that
say
was
God, right?
Yes.
He would say Yahweh or God. It's just hard to. But there was something going on with him that was just.
well. Look at his middle name,
You're like-
Amadeus.
But you're just like, how does this? I've worked so hard my entire life to understand, over coming up on 4 decades, to just understand like the drums. And so for me, it's like feet and paradiddles and patterns and holding time, and 4 decades. And I would say that I'm at a professional level of playing.
Well,
But here's a guy who's writing pieces at 5 symphonies, right? He's writing entire.
correct. His very first opera was at like the age of whatever it was. Like he was not even a teen. Give me a break. And at the age of 5, he was writing piano concertos. Here's the thing,
playing
though.
violin, and then picking up piano, and then doing the harpsichord, and then picking up other instruments, and then you're just like,
Which, by the way, I think there's something quite interesting. I think that's when gifted and talented meets opportunity, because his father was a composer. He was around it all the time. Which, by the way, his sister, I forget her name, Annalise, something like that.
Yeah.
His sister was arguably even more talented, it was said.
See, so here's an argument for DEI. Here's an argument for diversity, equity, and inclusion. You want to include
had to
gifted
go
children,
there,
but you want to include these
Yes,
children
because
it doesn't matter about their race or where they come from. It's your humanity, it's your abilities to come out of whatever environment you're in to showcase
We did this well, didn't we?
the beauty and your aesthetics and your talents. That's the best of what DEI is. DEI isn't some
By the way-
quota system to go, I'm going to put in 15 black people and 32 Hispanic people and 62 white people. That's not it. But because people don't understand, diversity is the breadth of beauty. The equity is giving somebody a chance who is a genius but is growing up in the projects, right? Yeah. Inclusion is a gifted kid who maybe isn't verbal and can't talk, but who's a savant on the keyboard, and they can memorize pieces of music instantly.
Well,
and they're a genius.
In today, it could be the keyboard of speaking the language of the digital world.
Of AI.
It could be of AI.
They can talk to
that's-
AI.
I mean,
Kids
look
on
at-
the spectrum have been shown, right, to be able to be, they're more connected to the algorithm AI stuff.
It's remarkable.
And they can connect with this. And maybe it's like maybe they're almost like a proto future human or something. I don't know.
Well,
maybe they're the future of what we're going to be, because
who's to say?
because they can think in binary and speak that kind of
Who's to
coding language or whatever.
That's the amazing thing. Well,
Right?
which, by the way, who was it? Wasn't it the British gentleman who The Imitation Game, the movie based on him? Is it Alan Turing? Who deciphered? He didn't decipher the Enigma machine, but he built a computer that would do it.
Oh, we saw the movie on that. Yeah.
He talk about
Yeah.
DEI.
Well,
because
he was on the spectrum, right? Wasn't he a spectrum guy? And he was just kind of odd, right?
And
he
there was also
didn't fit in the social customs
Nash,
at the time.
The mathematician, Russell Crowe played him in whatever movie it was.
Well, did Einstein? A lot of eccentric personalities are they don't fit in easy with social graces and stuff like that. They can't,
And
they're not operating on that level. They're operating on a kind of a different level with
and
things.
and by the way, can we also talk about the importance very briefly about doing something, a manifestation of you performing something with, your hands, meaning you are working, you're performing some kind of work, on how amazing art actually is, that we get to use this implement of ours, which, by the way, I also look at sports as an art form in the same way that I would look at dance as an art form. It's an art form. The athleticism, watching somebody perform an act, in this particular case, let's say it is, throwing a football. And being able, that is an art form.
No, it's a physical. Well, the Greeks with the Olympics, they saw the beauty of the human form,
and to be able to do something extraordinary.
Yeah, in its highest form, and not everybody was supposed to be able to wrestle,
right?
Like you could wrestle
or throw a javelin,
exactly, or do the jump and things. It was like this clear expression of beauty, which is why I can see. I mean. There are some aspects to fascism, that kind of a thing, that are, you can see the attractiveness of where you're attracted to strength and the Ubermensch kind of ideal and stuff. There are some things that are attractive to it.
But don't forget though, historically,
you just don't want to lose sight of how beauty can come in so many different forms, right?
Right, but
nature tells us that there isn't just one way. To anything.
No, because circumstances can change where one trait becomes completely obsolete and not necessary, and another trait that was so menial can make the difference between life and death. Hence, the survival of the fittest. It doesn't mean the most capable. It just means the ones that just happen to have a trait that just worked out better in the given circumstances and may not work out all that well somewhere else.
And sometimes it's random. Nature just randomly picks something that is a mutation, or there's genetic drift and stuff, right?
Gotta love nature.
It has nothing to do with being the fittest. It's just the survival.
You fit in better. Fittest fit in, not fittest as in I can run. I can run a mile.
If anything, it's the luckiest. It's the luckiest.
Sometimes it could be.
It really is. It's a chance. You happened to be born with some kind of a trait that carried on, that didn't get deselected and carried on.
Did you know that there's a movie that depicts that exceptionally well? That movie is called Ice Age.
Ice Age, yes. So it's a little chasing
little
that
squirrel.
thing. Yeah,
that little squirrel is my favorite.
Quite the lesson.
Which, by the way, isn't there another wonderful lesson about? Like everybody, like I remember looking at that movie going, "Oh, that squirrel! It's like catch a break already."
Yeah,
but can I just tell you one thing about an incredible lesson in that movie?
Yeah,
perseverance. That squirrel would simply not give up.
Yeah, and so he goes on to exist and pass on his genes, and then he keeps going, and then eventually squirrel becomes. Well, if it's Ice Age, it would have become something else, right? Because I don't think
it becomes a giant ice squirrel.
I was going to say they've evolved from something else. Yeah. And that's a beauty. I mean, think of the beauty of our genetics, and we can actually trace lineages and stuff. See,
aren't we 98% a tree?
Well, yeah, and there's the great aspects of science that science will use our genetic DNA to trace our lineage and figure out what weird line we came from that was an offshoot of a tree that was an offshoot of another tree that just happened to survive while Neanderthal didn't, and we did. And so it kind of absorbed them in some aspects of them.
Which, by the way, do you know what Neil deGrasse Tyson, having spoken about him earlier, he...
Shout out to Star Talk.
Absolutely fantastic, Neil.
Yeah.
Great work.
Yeah.
And I
just had Malcolm Gladwell on. I watched his whole
I can't wait to see that one. Because the remake of Cosmos with Seth MacFarlane being the producer, which, by the way, I just... That man is just awesome.
He's awesome.
Seth is just awesome. But going back to Neil... one of the things that I love, the thing that really sometimes just gives me that just that one little light out there is when Neil talks about humans containing the same stuff that stars are made out of.
We're star stuff.
And he says others look up at the sky and feel so small, whereas I look at the stars and kind of have that transcendent experience, like I'm made from the stuff of stars,
And that's what
and
we'll
the
go.
greatness
And
of
that's
that.
what we'll go back to.
And that's isn't that just remarkable?
Yeah,
and
that's
just
what we'll
beautiful.
Go back to. Yeah, no, I know. It makes you very thankful to be alive in this moment, because we can actually think and enjoy things, and maybe that's where we should end it.
Yeah.
Where we're people who are watching the
Yes.
interwebs out there, go enjoy your day.
Yes,
maybe,
just to
and,
go outside, enjoy some art,
enjoy some
listen
art.
to some great
Remember
music.
your star stuff, and yeah, art is the way to go. I'll tell you what, it just centers you and just makes you feel like there's hope again. And turn off the news, and
Yep,
it's
just
gonna be
go
what it's
enjoy
gonna
some
be.
art. Go into
It's gonna be
nature.
what it's gonna be.
Which, by the way, is art our sponsor for this episode? Art,
It has to be.
yes,
It has to be.
art. Keep looking.
That's right. Aesthetics and art make life worth living, and go find some or create some
Yes,
and share it.
create art.
Yep. All right, brother.
All right.
We'll see you guys until next week.
Yes,
Right.
enjoy. Till next time.
Join us on this path, let's ignite the blaze. So grab your headphones tight, let's go for a ride. With every spin and twist, we'll good and run and hide. The Prime Directive, where the laughter's alive. Society's reflections, let's help each other thrive. Politics and culture, oh what a blend. Join on the journey, let's set the trend. As we close the chapter, lend us your ear. The Prime Directive's calling, so let's persevere. The Prime Directive, where the laughter's alive. Society's reflections, let's help each other thrive. Politics and culture.